Let's return to Earth 6160 to follow the lifelong prison struggles of a wrongly convicted black man destined to become a symbol of power. That's Power Man. Yeah, it's that terrible. Alright, we're going to talk about it in our review of The Ultimates number 9 from Marvel Comics. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of The Ultimates number 9. But before we dig in, let's do a quick recap. When we last left the Ultimate Avengers in The Ultimates number 8, they received a visit from the Guardians of the Galaxy of the 61st century to reclaim one of their missing own, America Chavez. America had no recollection of her past affiliations since she crash-landed on Earth, mostly because the Maker's Council had wiped her memory and done all kinds of nefarious experiments on her. So the abrupt reunion resulted in a quick fight and an even quicker reconciliation. The Guardians departed with instructions to call if they should ever be needed in the future. Hint, hint, it's probably going to be the same time as when the Maker returns in 9 months. And that brings us to the current issue. In The Ultimates number 9, we find out it has nothing to do with the previous issue. Instead, the issue begins by following the life of one Carl Lucas, aka Luke Cage. Luke was imprisoned without an explanation or trial. He doesn't even know what he was arrested for. According to his prison counselor, Luke will be out in 1 year with good behavior if he just keeps quiet, goes along with everything that's happening, and doesn't make any waves. Of course, Luke's short-term incarceration doesn't go as planned. Luke endures years of prison hopping from one location to the next, being used as effectively private prison labor, suffering years of abuse by the prison guards as he educates himself and eventually radicalizes himself in the ways of power, partly in how to wield it and how it's also abused to keep people enslaved. The radicalization is borne out explicitly when Luke is seen reading a copy of Soledad Brother, written by a man whose life Luke directly mirrors in this issue. As Luke gets older and bigger and stronger, he becomes meaner and more determined to understand the ways of power and how to use them to find a way and fight his way out of the prison system keeping him down. He spends his day weightlifting on the one hand and on the other hand enduring beatings by the prison guards, respectively. One night, a glowing box materializes in Luke's cell with a holographic message from Iron Lad about returning the power to Luke that should have been his long ago. Remember, every superhero in this version of Earth was prevented from going through their fated origin story due to the machinations of the Maker. When Luke opens the box and lays his hands on the sphere inside, he gains the abilities of Power Man, which is enhanced strength and effectively indestructible skin. Once he gains all his powers, Luke escapes his cell, stages a prison revolt by gathering all his allies together, including fellow inmate Danny Rand, who appears in this comic but only for a few panels. They decide to take over the prison, and they succeed. Iron Lad soon arrives in person. This story takes place before Tony Stark was put into a coma by Banner, apparently, but it's not explicitly stated how soon before that the story takes place. Iron Lad welcomes Luke Cage to the Ultimates. In return, Luke refuses to join the team and instead remains a prisoner to destroy the private prison system from within by moving from one prison to the next and staging one revolt after the next until all the prisons are now under prisoner control, I guess. The issue ends with Tony Stark opening his eyes. And that's the issue, so let's talk about impressions, positives, negatives, what have you. Let me just start right off by saying I'm not going to get mad, I'm not going to rant, I'm not going to yell, I'm not going to lose my temper, but for the love of Uatu, why? Yes, it's February. Yes, it's a given that Marvel would position an issue about the Ultimate Power Man to come out in February in celebration of Black History Month. It's cliche, that's what Marvel does. You have to kind of expect that. So, I mean, that's not a surprise, and it really is not a big problem in this issue. However, if you're going to reimagine Luke Cage's life, why on earth would Denis Camp use George Jackson as the real-life inspiration? The creative direction of The Ultimates number 9 isn't racist. I mean, some people are expecting me to say something to that effect, but it's not. It's really not the problem here. But it is inexcusably stupid. And, okay, I'm not going to lose my temper. Let's just move on to the rest of the review. Let's switch gears for a second and talk about the art. We have a guest artist on the series, Chris Allen. He steps in as a guest to bring Luke Cage's prison experience to life in brutal, sordid detail. The issue is almost entirely presented in a 9-panel grid format for pretty much start to finish. So the strength of the art is determined by how well Alan can present the story through the grid in a series of montages, because that's what 9-panel grids are best known for in modern comics. It's a very montage kind of format. For the most part, Alan nails the aesthetic and the presentation of Luke Cage as a hardened, indomitable prisoner during one ordeal of prison violence after another. So the visuals in this issue have a gritty, grimy feel, but it matches this tone and the setting for what's happening here, so the art is good. We get a thumbs up for the art. Alright, let's talk about what's great about the Ultimates number 9. The praise due to Dennis Camp for this issue is the same praise he received for his take on the Ultimate She-Hulk in the Ultimates number 3. The reimagining of the main Earth 616 character is different enough to stand on, in this case, his own. Ultimate Power Man has a grittier, harder edge that reads more like the blaxploitation films of the 1970s than the kinder, gentler, softer Luke Cage of Earth 616. Now, I'm a huge blaxploitation fan. I love those films. I grew up in that era. So for me, that's a big positive. So I like that. If the point of creating the Ultimate Universe variants is to create variants that look and feel familiar, but stand apart from their mainline counterparts, on that point, yes, Camp succeeds. This is sort of Power Man, it's recognizable as Power Man, but this is a different enough Power Man that it's not too close. So what's not great about the Ultimates number 9? Oh boy, here it comes. It really comes down to 3 things. 2 that are minor, and then you have this big creative choice that's just hard to talk about. Regarding the 2 minor issues, first of all, Camp first neglects to explain how and why Luke winds up in prison. The intent is to lean on this notion that people are imprisoned unfairly. Okay, I can get behind that. But it would have landed better if even a minor offense was offered to show the justice system as unjust rather than random. I mean, he literally doesn't even know why he was arrested, doesn't know he was convicted, and didn't even go through a trial. If it was something silly or simple like jaywalking, that would have also been unjust, and it would have made more sense. But here, it just feels very random, which doesn't work very well. The second minor problem is that the issue appears to have no point, because Luke Cage ultimately rejects the offer to partner with the Ultimates. The whole point of restoring his power becomes moot in the face of the Maker's eventual return in 9 months or so. Why is Marvel wasting time with one-and-done stories that highlight individual characters if the whole point was to start gathering this massive team that would eventually face off against the Maker in sometime in October or November? If they're going to create characters that aren't going to be part of the team and aren't going to join the fight, what's the point? And now we get to the big one, which is we'll call it a problematic creative choice. Dennis Camp does nothing to disguise the fact that he uses the template of a real-life person and an activist by the name of George Jackson to pattern Luke Cage after. Jackson is famous for writing the Soledad Brothers book, which is explicitly shown in this issue, so he pretty much puts it out there right up front. But Camp conveniently neglects to leave out the facts that George Jackson was convicted of armed robbery, so he wasn't in prison for no reason. He became radicalized in his prison career by joining an extreme arm of the Black Panthers. He preached the glories of Marxism and Maoism and was later convicted for killing a prison guard and ultimately died during a prison break attempt. So if you are an educated individual and you choose not to cherry pick the circumstances of a historical individual's life, why on earth would you pattern a new version of a black superhero during Black History Month after a violent criminal activist and a murderer? Again, the creative choices in the Ultimates number 9 don't make Dennis Camp a racist. That's the low IQ way to attack this problem. Although you could make the case that, yeah, he's leaning on some pretty heavy stereotypes here. But it's hard to believe they thought through the ugly stereotypes that would come about with this series of foolish creative choices that we've been led to. What is Dennis Camp doing? You're trying to build up a superhero, somebody who's better than the rest of us, somebody that you could aspire to. Why on earth would you pattern that person after a criminal, after a murderer, after a radical leftist activist who is steeped in radical ideologies? What was Dennis Camp thinking? All right, final thoughts. What do we think about the Ultimates number 9? It reimagines Power Man on Earth 6160 by turning him into a career prison inmate, radicalized into becoming an activist, patterned after a real-life activist by the name of George Jackson. Dennis Camp's gritty tone reads like a blaxploitation film, which is a positive in this case, and Chris Allen's art makes the 9-panel structure succeed beyond the limitations of the format. That said, patterning an original-ish sort of kind of black character after a radical Marxist and convicted murderer is a creative choice that's in extremely poor taste and mind-bogglingly stupid. Therefore, the Ultimates number 9 earns a 4 out of 10. I'm being generous with that score, mostly because of the art and mostly because there is still some potential in here, even if the creative choices are almost insulting. I mean, that's kind of the nicest way I can put it. You know what, but what do you think? Do you find this kind of activist inspiration in your comics, even for characters that are supposed to be sort of original takes? Do you like that sort of stuff? Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the one that's being an old fuddy-duddy. Who knows? Leave a thumbs up if you found this review helpful, and drop a comment below with which Ultimates character you would like to see translated into Earth 6160 next. Just from my perspective, ideally not done by Dennis Camp. Also, remember to click on the link in the description to read the written review, check out the variant covers and preview pages, and buy this comic to help support the channel. Your support, of course, is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. So thank you very much for joining, and stay tuned through the outro for more reviews just like this one.